Henry Miles had always believed that a man's worth wasn't in the money he carried, but in the warmth he gave to the world. At 56, with a lined face and gray at his temples, he was known as Mr. Sunshine among Chicago's bus riders. Every morning before sunrise, Henry would stand on his porch, holding a steaming mug of coffee, listening to the city breathe awake. The distant hum of trains, stray dogs barking, and the occasional car horn echoing in the foggy dawn. His little house in Englewood was modest, paint peeling, and the garden full of old marigolds. Inside, photos of his mother, his late wife, and the neighborhood children he once coached at the local basketball court covered the walls. Despite years of hardship, loss, and cold winters, Henry found joy in the smallest things. The way frost sparkled on leaves, or how a stranger's smile could warm him more than his threadbare coat ever did. Henry's bus was his second home. Every seat, every window smudge, every scratch on the dashboard told stories. The older riders called him their guardian angel, and kids begged their parents to ride his bus just to hear his jokes. He carried a jar of candy to hand out, and his booming laugh seemed to dance in the air long after he finished telling a story. That November morning was no different at first. The first snowfall had left the city blanketed in white, and the sidewalks were slick as glass. Henry put on his thick wool socks, slid into his sturdy boots, a gift from his late wife years ago, and set out, humming an old gospel tune. As he turned onto 67th Street, he spotted an elderly neighbor, Miss Geraldine, struggling with grocery bags. Without a second thought, he jogged over, helped her inside, and made sure her heat was working before heading to the depot. At the bus yard, Henry greeted every mechanic and driver by name, throwing in playful jabs and warm hugs. He believed that kindness wasn't something you rationed. It was something you gave freely, like breathing. As he climbed into bus number 2423, he touched a photo taped above his dashboard. A picture of his wife smiling in the sun. "Let's do it again today, baby," he whispered, before rolling out into the waking city. Henry's first stops of the day were always filled with familiar faces. A young mother with her twin daughters bundled up like marshmallows, an old man named Walter, who carried a violin case, even though he hadn't played in years, and Maria, a nurse working double shifts, who always fell asleep 2 stops before the hospital. Henry felt like each rider was a verse in a long, beautiful song that only he could hear. That morning, however, a sense of heaviness hung in the cold air. The city had been hit hard economically, and you could see it on people's faces, worry lines deepening, eyes cast downward. But Henry made it his mission to lift them up. When Maria boarded, he teased, "Don't forget to wake up this time, nurse superstar." She laughed sleepily, patting his shoulder as she shuffled to her usual seat. At another stop, a teenage boy named Jamal dragged himself onto the bus. His shoes were worn down to threads, duct tape desperately holding the soles together. Jamal lowered his head to avoid the stairs and curled up in the back seat, clutching a battered backpack. Henry watched through the rearview mirror, his heart tightening. He knew that boy's story: a single mother working 2 jobs, a father long gone, and a son who carried the weight of a world too heavy for his young shoulders. Henry continued driving, calling out each stop with that familiar warm baritone. "State and Lake, don't miss your dreams," or "Michigan Avenue, watch out for blessings today." The riders chuckled. Their heavy moods lifted, if only for a moment. Halfway through his route, Henry stopped at a red light. He looked down at his boots, thick, sturdy, lined with warm fleece, and then glanced back at Jamal's taped shoes. A memory surfaced. one winter years ago when his mother had given her only warm coat to a neighbor, saying, "God always has a bigger coat waiting for me." The words echoed through him like an old hymn. Suddenly, Henry knew what he had to do. He pulled over at a small park. Jamal looked up, confused. Henry called out to him gently, "Hey, young man, come here for a second." Jamal hesitated, shrinking into his seat, but something in Henry's kind eyes coaxed him forward. Henry sat on the bus step, untying his boots. Jamal stared, mouth open. Henry handed them to him with a grin, saying, "Every dream starts with a good pair of shoes, son." Jamal's eyes flooded with tears as he took the heavy boots in trembling hands. Without waiting for thanks, Henry stood in his wool socks, smiling as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Jamal hugged him tightly before slipping into the boots, feeling taller, stronger, as if he could finally fare the world. When they reboarded, the entire bus fell silent. The older passengers wiped their eyes. A young woman started clapping softly, and soon everyone joined in. As Henry resumed driving, Jamal kept staring down at his new boots, touching the thick laces as if afraid they might vanish. The bus felt transformed. The once quiet morning now carried a gentle hum of gratitude. People began talking softly to one another, some even offering to share sandwiches or spare change with Jamal. It was as if Henry's single act had ignited something dormant in each of them. At every stop, word of the bus driver's kindness spread. An elderly woman whispered to her friend, "Did you see what he did? We need more people like him." A college student texted her mother, describing the scene with tears in her eyes. Social media posts started to pop up. "Just witnessed a bus driver give his own boots to a kid in need. Restoring my faith in humanity today." Henry, meanwhile, remained his cheerful self, greeting each new passenger as if they were family. But deep inside, he felt a warmth beyond any applause or thanks. In a world obsessed with status and possessions, he had remembered something pure, that true wealth lies in the courage to give without expecting anything back. At the next big stop downtown, a local news reporter, who had heard about the incident from a passenger's tweet, was waiting. She waved Henry down, asking, Sir, can we talk to you about what happened this morning?" Henry laughed softly, embarrassed. "Oh, I was just doing what my mama taught me. You see someone in need, you help. No big deal," he insisted, scratching his head. But it was a big deal. By the time his shift ended, dozens of people had gathered at the bus depot. Some carried signs that read, "Thank you, Henry," and "Kindness is contagious." Others brought him hot cocoa, thick wool socks, and even new boots. Jamal, still wearing Henry's boots, stood at the front of the crowd. His mother was by his side, tears streaming down her cheeks. She stepped forward and embraced Henry, whispering, "I don't have words, sir. My son has been so lost. You gave him more than boots today. You gave him hope." Henry hugged her back, eyes wet. "He gave me hope too," he replied. A city council member approached Henry next, shaking his hand firmly. "We don't see this kind of humanity every day," he said. "We'd like to honor you at City Hall tomorrow." Henry chuckled, overwhelmed, but agreed. That night, as Henry walked home barefoot but with a full heart, he passed strangers who smiled and nodded in silent thanks. For once, the city felt smaller, warmer, as if everyone had taken a step closer to each other. Henry didn't care about the cameras, the praise, or the ceremony to come. What mattered most to him was knowing he had planted a seed of kindness that would grow far beyond that cold winter morning. The next morning, Henry woke up to a phone buzzing non-stop. His niece had texted, "Uncle Henry, You're all over the news. Everyone's talking about you." He rubbed his eyes, still in disbelief at the whirlwind that had started from a simple, selfless act. As he got dressed, he realized he still didn't have new shoes. He slipped on an old pair of slippers, laughing to himself. Outside, neighbors waved and cheered. "You're a hero, Henry!" someone shouted. But he didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like himself, a man raised to believe that one small act could change a life. When he arrived at City Hall, he was greeted with camera flashes and reporters shoving microphones in his face. They all wanted to know what inspired him to give away his boots. Henry shrugged shyly. "I didn't think twice. If you have two and someone has none, it's simple. You share." Inside the council chamber, the mayor stood ready with a plaque. Jamal and his mother were already seated in the front row. The young boy looked so different now, chin held higher, his new boots polished and gleaming. The mayor stepped up to the podium. "In a time when we're divided and isolated, we need reminders of our shared humanity. Henry didn't just give away his boots. He gave away warmth, dignity, and hope," she said, her voice cracking. Henry was called forward, and the entire room rose to its feet, delivering a thunderous standing ovation. Some people cried openly, clapping until their hands were red. Jamal's mother came up to speak next. Her voice trembled as she addressed the crowd. "I have struggled to keep my son safe and warm, but yesterday, someone reminded him, and all of us, that goodness still exists. Henry's kindness showed my son that he matters." Jamal stepped forward too. He took the microphone awkwardly, but his words were clear. "I want to be like Henry when I grow up," he said, his eyes fixed on the man who had become his hero. Henry tried to say something, but emotion overcame him. He simply hugged Jamal tightly, the two of them framed by the glow of camera flashes and the quiet hush of shared awe. When they left the stage, Henry leaned down to Jamal and whispered, "You already are, kid. You already are." That day, photos and videos flooded social media under hashtags like #BusDriverHero, #KindnessWins, and #ShoesOfHope. Schools held assemblies to talk about his act. Local businesses offered Henry free shoes for life. People donated to shelters in his name, and a foundation was started to help homeless youth. Henry's small act had turned into a movement. The next week felt like a dream for Henry. The city buses he once drove every day now had posters with his photo and the words, "One step of kindness can carry 1,000 souls." Passengers would clap when he boarded, and his fellow drivers treated him like a local celebrity. Yet, in private moments, Henry felt overwhelmed. He had never craved attention. All he ever wanted was to live by the values his mother taught him. Share what you have, treat others with dignity, and never turn your back on someone in need. Late one evening, Henry sat on his small porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars. He thought about Jamal, and the moment the boy had slipped his cold feet into those warm boots. That image stayed with him more than any news article or city award. The following morning, Henry received a handwritten letter in his mailbox. It was from Jamal. "Dear Mr. Henry, I wanted to tell you that I wore the boots to school today. The other kids said they were cool. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. My mom said I can dream big now because you showed me what big hearts look like. Thank you for making me feel strong. Love, Jamal." Henry clutched the letter, tears streaming down his cheeks. In that moment, he knew that no city honor, no TV interview, no award could compare to the raw honesty of that little boy's words. A week later, the mayor invited Henry to a gala dinner honoring community heroes. Henry was hesitant, but Jamal and his mother insisted on going together. When they arrived, the entire room stood in applause once again. The mayor announced, "Tonight, we celebrate someone who didn't just give away a pair of boots. He gave away courage, dignity, and a renewed belief in humanity." Henry stepped onto the stage. He looked over at Jamal and his mother, then at the crowd. Wealthy donors in elegant clothes, community leaders, and everyday people who had been touched by his story. Henry took a deep breath and spoke softly. "It shouldn't take a camera or a headline to do the right thing. Every day, we pass someone who needs help. All it takes is one moment of courage. If my mother taught me anything, it's that the smallest act can ripple far beyond what we see." The audience rose again, this time even more deeply moved, some wiping tears, some hugging each other. By the end of the night, donations poured in to support homeless youth in the city. Jamal was offered scholarships. A local businessman even promised to help Jamal's mother find stable housing. After the gala, Henry and Jamal's family took a slow walk home under the city lights. Jamal held Henry's hand tightly, like a grandson who had found a long-lost grandfather. Henry noticed how the boy carried himself differently now, shoulders back, chin up, eyes bright. It was as if the kindness he received had unlocked a hidden strength inside him. Over the next few weeks, people from all walks of life began reaching out to Henry. Former passengers, teachers, nurses, and even police officers stopped him on the street to thank him. Some shared stories of how his act had inspired them to give food to someone in need, pay for a stranger's groceries, or help an elderly neighbor. Local journalists started calling Henry the gentle giant of the city, but he always corrected them. "I'm no giant, I'm just a bus driver who did what felt right." One day, while visiting the bus depot, Henry noticed a new driver sitting alone, looking anxious before his first route. Henry walked over, placed a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder, and shared the story of the boots. The young driver listened in awe, his nervousness fading as Henry spoke. "Remember," Henry told him, "it's not about getting people from one stop to the next. It's about who they become along the way, and who you become too." Later that week, the young driver would be seen helping an elderly woman carry her shopping bags off the bus and waiting until she safely reached her home. Word of these quiet acts began to spread, creating a ripple effect among the city's drivers. Meanwhile, Jamal thrived. His grades improved, he joined the school chess club, and he started drawing pictures of superheroes, each one with kind eyes and a gentle smile, just like Henry's. Jamal's mother finally secured a steady job at a nearby community center. During her breaks, she would talk to other single parents about hope, reminding them that sometimes an unexpected hand can lift an entire family out of the dark. Henry found himself more fulfilled than he had ever been. Despite all the recognition, he continued driving his regular route. Passengers loved seeing him behind the wheel, not just because of his fame, but because he made every rider feel seen and respected. Every time he glanced at his own feet, Henry thought of those empty boots, now worn proudly by Jamal, and smiled. He knew that in giving them away, he had stepped into something far bigger than he ever imagined. A new chapter of connection and healing for a city that badly needed it. As winter crept back into the city, Henry noticed a change in the atmosphere on his bus. Passengers who once sat in silence now greeted each other warmly. Small acts of kindness popped up daily. An older man offering his seat to a pregnant woman, a student helping an elderly passenger with her groceries, strangers sharing umbrellas at crowded stops. Henry watched these moments unfold with quiet pride. Every small act felt like another stitch, mending the torn fabric of a city, too often divided by indifference and fear. At the local community center, Jamal's mother started a support group for parents who had experienced homelessness. She shared her own story, the sleepless nights, the tears she hid from her son, and the stranger who gave them hope. Each meeting ended with hugs and new friendships, and Jamal often sat nearby, sketching superheroes in the corner. One day, a well-dressed man in a dark suit boarded Henry's bus. He introduced himself as a city councilman and handed Henry an official letter. Henry read it slowly, his eyes widening. The letter announced that a new community initiative would be named Henry's Steps in honor of his kindness. It would provide shoes, coats, and basic essentials to children in need, ensuring no child in the city went cold again. Henry was stunned. His hands trembled as he folded the letter. The councilman patted him on the back and said, "Your one act started something none of us could have imagined. You didn't just give a boy a pair of shoes. You gave this city its heart back." That night, Henry sat in his small kitchen, sipping tea and staring at the letter. He thought of the countless mornings he had pulled on those boots, not knowing they would one day change lives. Tears rolled down his cheeks, tears of gratitude, relief, and a deep, humble joy. A few days later, Jamal and his mother came to visit Henry. Jamal ran to him, wearing the same boots, though now scuffed and marked with adventure. The boy hugged Henry so fiercely that it almost knocked him off balance. "Thank you for giving me more than shoes," Jamal said, looking up at him with shining eyes. "You gave me courage." Henry knelt down, looking at Jamal at eye level. "And you gave me purpose," he whispered, his voice cracking. Together, they stood in the doorway, the warm light of Henry's home spilling out into the cold night. Neighbors passing by waved and called out greetings, a testament to the new spirit that Henry's kindness had sparked. As spring approached, the city bloomed in ways no one could have predicted. The Henry's Steps initiative expanded rapidly. Local businesses pitched in, schools held charity drives, and artists created murals depicting moments of kindness around bus stops. Henry's simple act had become a living symbol of what it meant to care for your community, not just in grand gestures, but in the smallest, most human ways. Henry continued driving his bus every morning, but people no longer saw just a driver in a faded uniform. They saw a quiet hero. Passengers often shared their own stories of kindness with him. A young man who paid for a stranger's groceries, a nurse who stayed late to comfort a patient, a child who gave up their lunch to a friend. Each story lit up Henry's heart like a lantern in the dark. At the annual City Awards Gala, Henry was invited to speak. He stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, including the mayor and city officials. His hands trembled, but when he saw Jamal and his mother in the front row, he felt a surge of strength. "I never thought of myself as special," Henry began, his voice gentle but steady. "I just saw a boy who needed help. In that moment, I didn't think about tomorrow or the cost. I just thought about what was right. And that's what each of us can do. We don't need titles or awards. We just need hearts that are open." The room erupted in applause, but Henry's eyes stayed on Jamal, who stood up and started clapping first, his little hands raised high above his head. Soon, the entire audience rose, giving Henry a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. After the event, people lined up to shake Henry's hand, to thank him, to share how his story had inspired them to look at their own lives differently. The once quiet bus driver had unknowingly become the pulse of the city's transformation. Jamal hugged Henry once again, whispering, "You're my hero." Henry knelt down and looked at him, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. "No, Jamal," he said softly. "You're mine." When Henry finally went home that night, he stood on his porch and looked up at the stars. He thought about all the small moments that had led to this: a cold winter morning, an old pair of boots, and a decision made with nothing but love. In a world often defined by power and noise, Henry had proven that true change starts quietly, in the silent choices of a kind heart. And so, the bus driver who once gave away his shoes went to bed that night, knowing he had given away something far greater: hope, humanity, and the courage to care. The city never stopped telling his story, and in every heart it touched, Henry lived on, a gentle reminder that even the smallest act can echo forever.